I'm the Lao Minnesotan Poet Laureate. Now granted, that, as I often joke with my students, that and a cup of coffee gets you a cup of coffee, but if you're looking for a Lao poet, I tend to be one of the ones that you can come to. Then I've been writing for well over 30 years now. My work has been published internationally. I serve in many different roles and many different functions across the community. I am a 2019 Joyce Fellow here. I'm working with the Lao Assistance Centre in Minneapolis, along with many of our other colleagues in diaspora across the country then, to address a particular theme then that our project is entitled Lao Imagination, or Lao Imagination 45, to be particularly specific about it. Who have we been? Who are we now? Who are we becoming? And this is a conversation that many people are not necessarily very familiar with then. But we are very familiar with the recent documentary by Ken Burns about the Vietnam War, for example. And I'll let you in on a little secret here, is that we decided to have a little drinking game then, which was that, okay, every time that they mentioned the secret war for Laos then that took place between 1954 to 1975, it's like, we're going to take a drink. So, 18 hours of footage later, then, it's like, yeah, we're still kind of waiting, like, okay, yeah, like what? You got 2 drinks out of this whole process, right? And so this is, again, part of this question of how do we as a community start to address invisibility? How do we engage with one another? In my neighborhood, I've driven down to all of you for the last 9.5 hours today to get here. But one of our questions that I have in the North Minneapolis neighborhood is, well, we've been with you for almost half a century, and we still get a lot of people who just say, well, who are the Lao? Who are the Hmong? Who are, let alone, who are the members of these other communities? So as a little bit of a backtext for you, is that you need to imagine with me as you're walking through these images, Ben, is that Laos is a country that is over 600 years old. It was established functionally in the 1300s as the Kingdom of Lan Xang. And, such is the nature of kingdoms, that there's political tumult, rise and fall. How do we define our values? How do we create a cohesive community then? But around the 17th century, that kingdom broke up into 3 different kingdoms then over a succession problem, which was an interesting challenge. It's like, you're all familiar with the story of Antigone, right? Let's see, the classical Greek myth about how, Antigone is the last daughter of Oedipus. And in this process, then 2 of her brothers get involved in a civil war, and one of the brothers both of the brothers get killed. So she's the last of the children of Oedipus then. And while they bury the brother who defended the city, the one who was attacking the city wasn't going to be given burial rights. But she saw her family duty as, no, the right thing to do is to bury your family. It's like, no matter who they were in life, it's like you respect who they were as that family member. Well, anyway, that's like where it came into the question with this ancient Greek myth was that, her uncle, and this is where I always say that we always teach Antigone wrong, her uncle Creon has to face this terrible proposition, which is that, all right, Antigone buries her brother, and that violates the law, and it's treason. It's treason which requires capital punishment. And so you will have to, it's like, but if you carry that out, you will kill your brother's last child. And so then the question is what are you going to do? Are you going to say that the rights of the state, that the state is more important than your family? But if you say that, then you're saying that, that's like, when my family means nothing, why should I be a part of that state? So that's this paradox. Laos got caught into a similar problem then, that the king was faced with the choice of, do I execute my only son for committing a crime of adultery? Because back in the day, somehow adultery was this capital crime. And so as a result, he made the choice and he had his son killed, but no one was around to succeed, and Laos got split into 3 kingdoms. And, well, let's just put it this way. Then from the 1700s to the 1800s, you think Game of Thrones ended strangely? Okay, yeah, it's like, it's like we'll come to you with the Lao version very soon. But where we're talking about and what you're seeing on the screens before here, which will inform the Lao Imagination project, and what you've been exposed to right now is a very early prototype of the final exhibit, is that you are seeing the documentary images of when the French Indochina era began, that the French colonial powers came in the late 1880s amid all the chaos in the region, and they took over the region that we now consider to be Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. And they decided to photograph it, to document it, to create all of these sketches then. And what I'm juxtaposing with it then is that for myself, coming in as an artist then, I came to the United States in 1973, right after the U.S. ended its secret bombing campaign. I was the adopted child of an American pilot who was flying there in the region. And over that time, I was not able to return back to my old home country until 30 years later, in 2003. And so the question is as you see in some of the color photographs then, is you see how I photograph it, you see how I respond to it, and where our artistic curiosity then is where do you place the focus, where do you place the emphasis, right? And it's like, the French had a habit, for example, of documenting, the traditional shamans, the traditional healers, then just painted us, oh, look at this, witchcraft, primitive savages, everything like that. And it's like, it's like here I am with the Buddhist monks on the left of me. Here you see how they're documenting our traditional artists. It's like, this is the question that we've got. But anyway, so this is the interesting element here that I'm going to bring as a conversational point then, is that part of what made the collection of these images so challenging and I think so interesting is can anyone guess where I managed to acquire a good many of them?
The stock image? The stock images?
Well, yeah, it's like for the older photographs, where do you think we managed to get a hold of many of them, of these images?
The postcards?
Postcards are one. But one of the most interesting sources that we found was French eBay. Yeah, that's like basically what we've got right now is this weird process that a lot of the old French foreign legionnaires are dying, and their children and their grandchildren don't know what to do with their grandparents' old photographs then, and so they're just selling them one at a time. Sometimes whole albums then. Like I don't know what to do with this, and can you imagine what this challenge is for those of us who were involved in the secret war and in this Lao diaspora then, of watching our history being sold off by strangers, and they're not even being offered necessarily to arts institutions, let alone to community institutions. It's like, even if they are priced at this ridiculous thing. Like, can you imagine it's like you have to pay something like, on a good photo, maybe, or even just a medium quality photo, imagine having to pay like $20 for that. It's like, no, it's kind of like, who has the budget for this? Who has the ability to do that? So we watch our history being held hostage. And so this is this whole interesting process of community reclamation, and why I think spaces like the Big Car Collective and so many others are so important to help create spaces to counterbalance that, to allow us to expose it to one another. But I'll tell you what, it's like the heart of my work then is also in poetry. And throughout this evening, if you'll all indulge me, I'll kind of show you kind of the inner workings about why poetry matters for us in particular as refugees, as a community in diaspora, to reclaim and to perhaps re-envision who we can be. So let's do a couple of proof of concepts, shall we? All right. Ironies. After 30 years of poetry, I learned at least 100 words in no less than 2 tons, unique to our journey as refugees, to fill vacuums and bloody gaps of our disputed histories. Recovering families, dismantling enemies, identifying the official tools of allies bombing us for our own good, their policies of destruction and resettlement, how to win hearts and minds in diaspora. From DC to Modesto, Anchorage to the Twin Cities, walking into 1,000 classrooms, strangers to the beauty of Vientiane, Savannakhet, a heartfelt sabadi, gathering ink storm clouds to change worlds. One poem still can't tell my whole story. Burning Eden, one branch at a time. My father, a skull before the wars were over, never saw my mother's flight in terror as our humbled kingdom fell to flame and shell. My mother was stripped to ink among the bureaucrats, a number for their raw statistics of jungle errors collated into cold ledgers marked classified, secret. My feet, dangling in the Mississippi, have forgotten what the mud in Vientiane feels like between your toes, while my hands hold foreign leaves and I whisper, maple, oak, weeping willow, as if saying their names aloud will rebuild my home. Now, I've been doing this for a tremendous amount of time, and I've had this luxury to say that as a writer, I was cut off from my community for well over 20 years then, but at the same time, the arts were a means for me to start making my way back. And that was something that was very difficult for many of us. But many of you may not be aware that in the United States, there are well over 400,000 of us as refugees from Laos alone. Then rebuilding our lives, rebuilding those traditions, finding those customs and heritage together, trying to figure out some meaning to piece this apart. And yet, in that process, I still often run into students who are also from Laos then, who want me to take them under their wing and to talk with them about, I want to create these poems, I want to create this literature then, but I want it to be read. And so how do I find these things for which there isn't an English word? And I'm just going, well, why? That's like, no, just maybe you need to use the words in your own language. Maybe we need to do that. And in poetry, this is the interesting question. How many of you are familiar with the poet Milton? Okay, Milton, Paradise Lost. It's like Milton, many people forget, was coming in the aftermath of his own civil war. And he found himself caught in the conundrum that to express that experience and to phrase it through the metaphor of Paradise Lost, because it was too difficult to just flat out say what happened during that war. So now here's this journey of a man going through literal metaphysical hell of Christianity, then seeing the people who are being punished, the people who are getting off scot-free, etc., etc. And it's still demanded in all new vocabulary. And so this is the question that we're also working with here, with a poem like Pasapalang, foreign words. En route to our cafe rendezvous, on University Avenue, debating sushi, pho, or nachos, everything bagels or decadent croissants, famished literary ninjas in a car, or were we Roman gun-ho samurai, pondering our ink-filled avatars, the verbose madam from Phnom Penh, the one who loves to sing, Domo arigato, Mr. Roboto, and every stanza of Bohemian Rhapsody at karaoke, Galileo, Galileo, reminds me, sub-ID will always be a foreign word. Aloha, America, avia sin. In the beginning, depending on the traditions you hear, there was nothing or there was chaos. No time, no space, not even a single atom, not a ray of light, a whisper, no scent of papaya or rivers, not a body, not a soul, not a ghost of a Dok Champa, or even a memory of a touch in the darkness, or a taste of a home-cooked meal from a tiny garden in the window, of a dreaming woman asleep amid her books and clothes, her brushes and tools. In the beginning, though, there was no hate, no war, no anger, no constant return to life after life because of our ignorance and lusts. Still, I look back with no regrets at our world of fires and love, of ice and hope. My mouth opens in song in the brief time upon earth I have, creating amid destruction, growing against silence. So, let's see, you may have seen a picture of a little young boy there holding an American flag in this slideshow then. That happens to be me, and that's like my mother went to the point of reminding me that, let's see, no, today is Flag Day, and that I was naturalized as a U.S. citizen on Flag Day in 1976, which was the American bicentennial. And again, that and a cup of coffee gets you a cup of coffee, but again, it's like this is that question for me that I've often contemplated then since is, what does it mean to be Lao? What does it mean to be American, to try and reconcile that? It took me a long time to put together this poem called Missoula, 1976. At 3 years old in Montana, I became a citizen on Flag Day during the American bicentennial. That and a cup of coffee gets you a cup of coffee, even if you write 1,000 poems for 1,000,000 elephants. I didn't stay there, of course, but in this city I met my first ghosts and dinosaurs, gorgons and ancient gods. I played with a young girl named Dulcinea, discovered the family pigs eaten by a bear, and saw my first neighbor die, crushed beneath a fallen telephone pole. I wish I remembered his name. A family dog, Dutch, in his tragic jealousy, tried to kill me a few times. I still have one scar from it after 40 years. But I miss him anyway, because that's the way refugee memory works. And this is also part of the question that we have as we're doing this work in the community with the Joyce Foundation and so many of the other oral history collection projects, not only in Minneapolis, but also across the country, then, is that people ask me, Bryan, why aren't you just teaching people to write these prose memoirs? And I'm going, because A, most of our elders had to work 2 or 3 jobs at a time. They didn't have access to that education, and the American literary system tends to discourage you if you don't have that perfect Stanford grammar. Then. And if you've ever been with anyone who has experienced conflict, then in this process of reconciling with that trauma, with being forced to leave your country and your homeland, then you know what? Yeah, your memory starts to punch a lot of holes in it. For those of us who are coming in out of a secret war, for example, our process is particularly complicated because no one was supposed to know about the war. So information, facts were deliberately obscured, records were destroyed. You also had these challenges of even when you could get a story out of someone, you couldn't trust that one because it's usually created in service to their benefit, not yours. And so we watch this constant erasure. We just saw it in California, where a well-meaning Vietnamese legislator introduced a bill which would teach the history of the boat people, which would teach the history of the Hmong people in the secret war, and it would also teach the history of the Cambodian killing fields. And we were caught in this paradox because this means for us then that, well, one, the regular Lao who weren't really fully part of the secret war then got completely excluded, but then we're also watching it and we're just saying, these are 1,000, 2,000, 4,000-year-old cultures, and the only thing that you can teach about them in an American school that you will require by law to teach it is a 20-year period of conflict, a 20-year period, and it's not that it's not severe, but is that all that we're going to be, is that we only exist in this dynamic to America. That's something that we have to consider. Someone just said, no, it's like just anything to start, we'll go with that. And so I'm going to actually go with a very important part of this process then too, is that one of the reasons why it means so much to me to come to Indianapolis today is that many of you may not be aware of it. It's like because, again, the nature of that secret war. But Indianapolis then has a very, very strong and honorable tie to the Lao community. That a long time ago, it's like, let's see, in our hour of our most desperate need, in a time when no one else knew what was going on, no one knew, and then some might argue, no one cared. Ed Buell, a retired Indiana farmer born in Steuben County, up north from you, when his wife died, he went to work for USAID. And he volunteered, and he got sent to Laos. He got sent there to teach us agriculture, to teach us how to raise pigs, how to raise crops, and everything else like that. But instead, found himself in the middle of a secret war, and he couldn't turn aside. And he did everything he could to make sure that thousands of our families made it across, that they made it to safety, that they found a way to rebuild their lives somewhere, anywhere. That is part of your Indianapolis, your Indiana legacy. But almost none of you know about that. None of you know about him. So I'm going to share with you a quote then, because I think it's important for us to at least take that time to acknowledge those who came before us. To give you a sense of this, though, no less a figure than John Steinbeck once came to visit Ed Buell in his work in Laos, and he walked away saying that meeting someone like Ed Buell proved to me that there are still giants that walk the earth because of that commitment to other people. In his 1970 biography by Don Skanke, Ed Buell said to him then as his final words after all this conflict, because remember, we've been in this war from 1954 to 1973 by the time he was writing it. Everything turns in time, and it'll turn again in Laos someday. Maybe it's turning now, maybe 10 years or 50 years before there's peace. But when that day comes, these people are going to remember what Tan Pop stood for, whether they remember me or not. They'll be just a little better off for my being there. And that's the only thing that keeps me going. No man is big enough or brave enough to go on working like this without some kind of purpose. I'm sowing seeds that, by God, someday is going to grow. Next year, it's 45 years since our diaspora began. I don't know, it's like, he passed away many, many years ago then. I think he would have been surprised to see that there's a Lao temple in Fort Wayne, of all places, that you can actually go and get Lao spicy level food, just right outside of Indianapolis. But I'd like to think that that's an important part of that journey, that we never know where we make a difference. So here's planting. Planting. The farmers, the gardeners of the world, bend to the earth on every continent, seeds in hand, holes in the soil like a hungry mouth, dark with mystery. Touch her with a word from the page, she smiles. Touch her with a hand at night, a million things might happen, like a young shoot climbing up from the ground, who might become a field, a shade forest, a bit of soup, on a complicated evening when she needs it most. This was a poem, Notes Regarding the Living Heart, that was used when finally Hillary Clinton went to go visit Laos and to see that after 40 years, over 30% of Laos was still contaminated with cluster bombs manufactured in Minnesota, which of course always for us is this strange contradiction. So many of us have these successful lives and we built so much in Minnesota, but back in the day, Minnesota manufactured most of the cluster bombs, which still, kill and maim so many of our community members, our families left behind. The figure that we recently received was that 30% of the victims are under the age of 12 in Laos. All right? We dropped more tons of bombs on Laos than in all of Europe during World War II. And if you do the math, that means that the parents of these children weren't even alive when the last bomb was dropped there. But when the Amish went in to talk to them about it, they just asked, it's like, do you see any problems? Is there anything unusual? Because they had been living with it for so long, they had no point, no frame of reference to understand that this was unusual. They had no understanding that, no, you don't have to live like this. Most people don't live with the idea that if you just simply walk out into your front yard, you could get blown up. But anyway. Notes regarding the living heart. A single seed can turn into a forest. A single heart can transform a nation. To be brave is Jaiga. To be generous is Jaikwan. To test the body, climb a mountain. To test the soul, meet another. To find happiness, meet as strangers, but don't stay that way. With a sub-ID, greet the days, one by one. With a gopchai and a smile, do what you can to change worlds, even 1 inch, one hand at a time. This is the path of a Jai, human and forever growing. But, as noble as that sentiment is that I admit, it's like poetry also can't let us off the hook. And so, at much risk, we're going to go in that direction to show you how some of those conversations went as we and my fellow poets were trying to figure out how to express this. So follow along with me, with you, for Liberty. The tree of liberty devours the loyal, grinding them between burning flag teeth and a ton of open doors. Blue lakes formed in the footprints of Babe, while the trail of tears formed a bloody river. Washington had a thing for breaking cherry trees and raising hemp that was good for strong ropes to bind us all together in a frenetic world of neckties and necessities. No one knows the names of Afghan heroes or Hmong veterans whose fathers raised opium crops now littered with landmines. Few can tell you where Russia is, even after 50 years of Cold Wars in tropical nations they never vacationed in personally. They would be unable to tell you how many of our allies are in an impossible debt negotiating a cost-effective betrayal. But they can tell you about friends and Miss October. Miscellaneous documents outlining illiterate farmers with $200 anti-tank weapons have surfaced to air our missile mania, a culture where no one sees the irony of naming $1 million cruise missile after a Tomahawk, while defanged reservations cope with underfunded schools. People laugh as immigrants report stories of American giants who press you beneath their green thumbs stained with dollars when it's time to eat. Cannibalized ideas and epics lay exhausted, scattered apple seeds in urban canyons formed by alien policies of war and leverage, and a great love of sequels. Half of a nation has never seen an orchard, only the recycled city papers they're being ignored in as usual. Somehow, the Cubans managed to preserve the purity of baseball and cigars, while we still can't imagine the rules to Canadian curling, despite our open borders. And strangely, when a laughing yellow cab driver who was a former engineer from Iraq tells me about U.S. chemical weapons and acid rain, I'm just not as surprised as I wish I could be. His last words rang like a cracked bell outside of smoking capitals of conspiracies. When there's a new war, watch. Refreshing new ethnic restaurant will open in your neighborhood soon. It was from 2003. And as you can imagine, it seems to me now as I look back at it. At first I laughed when Ezra Pound used to always say, poetry is news that stays news. I read this one recently at another read, and then someone goes, wow, you're really up on current events. No, this was like 15 years ago. Yeah. All right, let's do a lighter poem. This one's called Contracting. One morning over coffee, we were discussing terms, negotiating with a bit of levity the hue of a French postcard and an American biscotti. I mentioned casually, we say in the industry, you can get it good, fast, or cheap, but you can't have all three. Pick two. With a wry smile, he takes a sip of his hot macchiato. That's a good one. In my family, we say, you can get people who are obedient, smart, or loyal. Pick two. I suppose we all know where that got everyone. We shake hands, and I return to a world of ink, rife with all their uncertainties. When we're trying to use poetry to reconstruct our memories, that's a lot easier. Is that you talk to your grandparents, you talk to your elders, you're almost never going to be able to get them in the standard way that Western literature likes it. Like, no, tell me, from 1971 to 1972, where were you in the month of October during the full moon, then while this policy was being made? Our memories don't work like that. That's why I have to encourage our students, get down what you can, get down that emotional truth, get down the factual truth that you can. In my work as a transcultural adoptee, one of the biggest problems that I often get quoted on then was, as I point out, when you come from a background like this, you can never write your lives down in ink, only pencil, because you find out all too often that everything that you know about yourself can change in an instant. New information comes up, and it can just totally rearrange who you know about yourself. This is a poem that came out in a documentary recently called The Last War Poem. It was one that we talk about a lot. The Last War Poem. I tell you, this is the last word for this war, this little side war we were the center of. There is no justice from poetry. Any veteran can tell you that. They want their land, their lives, their livestock back. Grenade fishing, in the aftermath of a battle for Puhati, has lost its novelty to the man with a bullet fragment rattling in his body, slowly tearing him apart. Write, they tell me. Write what? We lost. We were forgotten. We are ghosts. We are victims of fat tigers and foreign policy. There is no Valhalla, only memories of Spectre gunships. There is no Elysium, only pleas for asylum. This jungle was filthy. There was fire. There was blood. There were refugees who to this day cannot explain why they were the enemy when the war came. Their sons fought. Their brothers died. Their uncles, maimed, were hauled, screaming into the shadows of a plain of jars. Write, they tell me, so people won't forget, so someone will know. Lift the broken bodies with my words. Bring them out and say, we did not die in vain. For every bullet hole, let there be a word to stand as a monument. For every lost limb, let there be a sonnet to stitch the truth back together. For every eye gone blind, let there be something to take its place. Something. Anything. How can you not have words for the war of whispers? And how can you not shout now that the whispering is done? And I swear, each time I break this promise, that the next time will be the last word I write about this damn war. All right. Tell you what, it's like personally, I like an audience and a poetry reading that's a little bit more interactive here. So we're going to play show of hands. All right, we have a lighthearted poem, or we have a more serious poem. Light, serious, light, serious. Okay, light-hearted? Okay, 2, that's not bad. All right, so you're going with serious. Well, you're still going to get both here. And yeah, see, it's not really a choice, but that's the illusion of choice, which is why we have to fight for that as artists. So this one actually comes to us from this strange premise then that in 2012 I had the honor and the distinction of being a Cultural Olympian. I represented the nation of Laos during the London 2012 Summer Games then as a poet, which of course I still get a lot of people going, I didn't know that you could do that. I didn't know either. And then it's like, like that line from, I want to say Clue. It's like, from that old teenager comedy, well, he doesn't even live there. It's the Olympics. I'm not going to argue. All right, the Olympics comes calling. If they come calling to you and they want you to represent your country, you know what you do? You say yes. All right? But anyway, so this is a poem that I sent forward called On a Stairway in Luang Prabang. Luang Prabang is our first city, really. But on a stairway in Luang Prabang, step as you will through life, 1,000 ways, 1,000 places. Carry a home in your heart or spend years seeking the door where your soul will always smile. Do you ease the way for others or just yourself? Do you climb great mountains just to leave them unchanged? One day, the heights of Holy Fusi will lay as soft valleys, and we only memories. But our children's children, will they too have a reason to smile, like those dreaming strangers who finished their stairs for us? And that's what we mean about that, is that as we look around and we see this world, is that that's one of the big challenges we've been having lately, is that a lot of memories are coming up there, like this whole TV series, I Love the 90s, or something like no, hey, wait, I lived through the 90s, so it's like this is a little bit too early to be having nostalgia shows about the 1990s, but okay. There's that classic Billy Joel song, right? That's like, it's like, we didn't start the fire. And it's like, and we're always looking for them, we're going, wow. And it's like, it's like how much of that applies to us? But it's like, but again, there is this point that we come into this world where we're a part of it. All right, so before we go into the serious one, here's that lighthearted one I got for you, called Jai Gai Nyai, Heart of a Big Chicken. Or, though my heart is a dinosaur, and you but a cold meteor, fly as you will to my atmosphere, I'll return in my own way. Perhaps as poultry, perhaps a gallon of diesel, some polished paperweight, or mixed in the concrete naga in a temple for 1,000 souls who will come back many times because they couldn't let go without regret. But that movie Frozen ruined that closing line for me. So, it's interesting being 3 hours away from my old college, Ben, where it was just this whole strange experience, I suppose, of you spend a lot of time in Westerville, Ohio, of all places, Ben, and you're asking like, okay, yeah, is this where I'm supposed to find the roots of the first steps to my identity, searching for yourself, and so on. But I am fortunate I had a professor there, and this is kind of what he taught me. Thank you, Professor Rose. For betrayal in Arabia, you lose your head. For betrayal in America, you get a movie deal. For loyalty in Russia, you'll never visit the basements of Dzerzhinsky Square until the party line changes. For loyalty in England, you'll get a Shakespeare play. For absence in America, you'll get actors in office wrestling with post-Cold War policies. For absence in Africa, you miss the struggle of post-colonials for whom peace has no diplomatic immunity. For presence in Kuwait, the Kurds get gassed when you leave. For a presence in Vietnam, you you get told to get out. For people who major in political science, they can buy groceries if they want. For people who dig ditches, they can build empires instead if they stop. All right. And so I'm going to kind of wrap this one up here with the poem The Grass, and then maybe open it up more towards what I call the experimental part of the Lao Imagination exhibit here of a ask me any topic and let me see if I've got a poem to try and address that for you. We'll do that for free. How about that? But all right, so the closing poem I was going to share with you was a haiku called The Grass, which I had the honor of being translated. For some reason, it's like, haikus apparently are very popular to translate into multiple languages. I can't imagine why. But I hope this leaves you with a sense of hope then. The grass. Among jade grass blades, even mighty Bodhi trees must share the same earth. All right, and so now, I was like, you have been a wonderful audience here. I was like, all right, let's see if anyone wants to, yes. All right, so I am open to poem requests at this point, or a conversation on a particular area where, Bryan, it's like, I love this conversation and everything else like that, but you totally skimmed over something like, who really killed JFK or something like that. It's like, I will do my best to answer the things which I can tell you about. Yes?
Can you actually just read that haiku again?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I'll even give you the syllable count for that one so that you can see that it's the real deal. The grass. Among jade grass blades, even mighty Bodhi trees must share, I'm so bad at that, must share the same earth. All right. I saw another question in the back over there, I think. Yes, Lee. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's a good one, Ben, because again, this is an interesting month again that why I'm also particularly honored for this is that even as we're just coming off of Memorial Day and all, and remembering the 75th anniversary of Normandy, then when we all agreed back then that it was okay to, at the very least, punch a Nazi. No, I'm sorry. It's like, this is terribly off topic. I lost a friend of 10 years, apparently, because I suggested that it's okay to punch a Nazi. And if you are all offended by the idea that, yeah, you know what, it's like Nazis don't get a platform here. It's like, I understand if you leave. But anyway, it's like, all right, this year, it's like this month is also the anniversary of the death of Vincent Chin. When I was growing up in Michigan, that was one of the very interesting experiences for me because Vincent Chin was a Chinese man then who had the misfortune of living in Detroit during the time of anti-Japanese hysteria. All the big car manufacturers, Ford, GM, Chrysler, had convinced their workers and others that the big problem was that Japanese cars were taking their jobs. It's like, no, car manufacturing was taking away their jobs and so on. Vincent Chin was at his bachelor's party scheduled to be married, and he got into an altercation with two laid-off auto workers who told him that it's because of, expletive like you, that we lost our jobs. And then they got into a fight, and just when Vincent Chin thought it was over, though, they came up behind him and cracked his skull in with a baseball bat. And in that time, the two men were arrested, but wound up never serving a day in jail. It's like their fine was, I believe, less than $3,000, which even in 1980s money wouldn't even buy you a good used car. And as many of the Asian American activists will point out, this was essentially a license to kill Asians. But the good that came out of it was this idea that we could be a community, that we could take a stand, that much of what we see this is Vincent right here, much of what we see in Asian American activism comes from people who suddenly realized we can't be quiet to injustice, that we have a right as your neighbors, as your friends, as your communities, whether you're a refugee, an immigrant, or whether you're born in the US. We should all have this ability to live our lives, to pursue the best that we can, education, jobs, whatever you want, to pursue that dream. And it's like, for me, that was an important lesson because, again, growing up in the 1980s, I was 10 years old when Vincent was killed, and it always resonated with me because, again, it's like, no, being Lao, it's like, yeah, you get mistaken for a lot of different things. It's like, and I suppose this is an off-topic point there. For me, growing up, I found American racism was shaped in a way of I got discriminated against based on whichever brown person they hated in that state at the time. So, you know where this goes. Okay, so in Alaska, I got jumped for being mistaken for an Eskimo or an Inuit. That's like in Michigan, it was for being Japanese. In Ohio, it was interesting. It's like I got accused of being Mexican and being told to go home. And I was so shocked at these Westerville teenagers because I'm just going, I don't know how to feel insulted by this. But your racism is problematic in itself. But you don't have, but you don't have the right slur either. What on earth is happening to American education? Yeah. Even beyond that self-interest is that it taught me that we all have to advocate for one another there, because you never know what ridiculous reason people will find to start a problem there. And the best we can do is to try and be there for each other. But that's my Vincent Chin story on that. It's also important because next week is, on the 20th, we have World Refugee Day. And this is also another reason why I'm trying to get all these ideas onto your radar, is that, after all, it's like America is built by refugees. America is built by immigrants. And America is built by people who dare to dream. And for you to come here tonight, to be in this communion with one another, to laugh, to share food, to engage in art. In many ways, isn't that the American dream? Everything, all your other goals aside, isn't that what you always just really wanted? To be able to be someplace, to have peace. But now, as I tell all of my students, this isn't the end. The question is, where can you go from beyond that? Oh, I actually had a whole poem about Vincent Chin, but I'm not going to read that one because that's for reasons. There's a special request for it. But all right, that's like, do we still have a little bit of time?
As much as you want.
Oh.
Well, I mean, but we are going to go over to listen here next.
Yes. Okay. Well, that's also good too. But I'll tell you what, let's give space for 2 more questions or 2 more poems, whichever you want. Yes.
So you're working on another book, right?
I'm always working on another book. I've actually got a new book coming out this month called Before We Remember, We Dream, which is an interesting one because my side work, well, not really my side work, but the thing that catches people by surprise is that I operate in speculative poetry, which is a particular segment of poetics which is engaged with science fiction, fantasy, and horror then. And so this is one which is simultaneously memoir combined with reflections on the meaning of films such as Blade Runner. Let's see, and this is always a great question here because with Blade Runner, people always ask me, like, Bryan, why are you doing all this science fiction stuff too? And I'm going, because you know what? When we came to the United States, and we saw Southeast Asians depicted in the movies, and we saw how you showed us on television, you know what we got? We got the silent villagers or the prostitutes of Apocalypse Now and Full Metal Jacket. We got all these disposable villains that just get mowed down by characters like Rambo. The first Rambo is okay. It's a great story about PTSD. By the second one, I was like, okay, I don't see the logic train of how you got from poor John Rambo to, let's go back and just become a one-man murder hobo. Sorry, that's a terrible way to describe him. Okay, but what we're seeing with a film like Blade Runner was an interesting one about the paradox of being a writer and an artist of color in America, was that, wow, It's like that film depicted this futuristic Los Angeles, a dystopian Los Angeles, then where, the streets were crowded with Asian people. It's like, I'm just looking and go, okay. It's like, you've got Hare Krishnas walking peacefully right alongside, punk rockers. You've got, an all-you-can-eat noodle shop right there, like the ultimate taco truck, where it's like, if you watch that opening sequence of Blade Runner, then you see Harrison Ford going, two, and the noodle chef is just going, no, one. It's like, one is all you need. It's like, I'm giving you a big, it's like, and it's like, I was an impressionable young man at that point. I'm going, this doesn't sound horrible at all. but yeah, so that's my next book that's coming out then, about how do we, it's like the big theme of it is, how do we work with those memories? It's like, what are you going to transform them into?
Yeah, I was more interested in seeing if we could get a preview of.
Let's see. That's a good question. That's going to depend on whether or not I can actually get my Wi-Fi connection running out there. I know. It's like, okay, let me rephrase, but if that's going to depend on whether or not, let's see. No. Google Drive, it's like, don't fail me now. It's a great request. Let's see. Are you all interested in seeing what we're doing with this new book? Yes. Okay, so let me rephrase this also. Is that George Orwell famously said that a poetry reading can be a grisly thing. And so I admit, it's like, I have spent my life in poetry here, and I totally appreciate it, but that's like, okay, so for how many of you, is this your very first poetry reading? Wow, congratulations, you just made a historical precedent. Okay, is this your first poetry reading with a Lao American writer?
Yes.
Yeah, all right, okay, good. That's like, if it isn't, it's like, let me know. Yeah, I'm bad. But, all right, well, here's basically one of the opening poems, Ben. Now, to place it into context, the Nak, or the Naga, is the serpent god that you see guarding the Buddhist temples around the world when it comes to the Lao community. In fact, that's actually the way that you can tell if it's a Lao temple or a Thai temple. The Thai like a bird called the Garuda. The Lao like the serpent, then, which is the same serpent, or from the same family of serpents, but wrapped itself around the Buddha to protect the Buddha from the rain while he's trying to get enlightenment. In fact, as a quick segue, I love this part because there's a great story about a Naga where Nagas are not human, so they couldn't, under the Buddha's rules, attain enlightenment. But there was one Naga, though, who deeply loved the teachings of the Buddha, and he wanted to be a disciple of the Buddha, to take on the saffron robes. And he kept begging the Buddha, like, please, let me be a disciple of yours. And the Buddha said, this isn't going to work. You can't. It's like you can't. It's like you metaphysically cannot attain nirvana. But I really just want to. And it's like, and demonstrated, watch, I can turn into a human being. Boom, because so many of the creatures of Lao mythology are shapeshifters. And so it's like, okay, yes, I agree. It's like, he's just going, yes, you're a human being at this point. And so it's like, and so he got put on this probationary period. And, he's all happy and everything else like that. All right, and so one thing to understand about the Buddhist monks, then, is that you only get one meal a day, but you get a pretty big meal at right around lunchtime, which would be very much like what you just had today. Well, anyway, it was so good that, unfortunately, this little Nak disguised as a human, disguised as a monk, went into a food coma, and it got really sleepy. And as you can imagine where I'm leading the story, then all of a sudden, he transformed back into his gigantic 60-foot snake form then. And another monk walked in on it and just kind of, and it's like everyone comes in, and the Buddha just goes, I told you. It's like, we all knew. It's like, and the Nak finally just says, okay, yeah, you got me here. But and this is the way the story goes, is that just do me this favor, then I want people to remember, well, I tried. And I really gave it my best effort. And so it's like I'm asking then from that day forward is that young novice monks be referred to as a nak. And that in Lao culture is why the younger monks are always called nak. Then to remember this time when someone tried to learn and tried to find the right path. And even if it didn't work out, we still saw merit and we still saw value in that. And so that's kind of, and I'd give you that backstory then because A, I love mythology, and B, it leads into this opening poem then from The Narrative of a Nak's Heirs. Never read my life as the diary of some sad refugee. My account is not intended as a routine narrative of adversity overcome, mere survival once again transcending a descent to white-hot hell converted to a placid limbo of frogs. No, I miss the familiar here, the familiar strange here, in a way you cannot fathom. Our hard ghosts remain vigilant, thin as an ink scratch on an old palm leaf, haunting with a tongue claimed incomprehensible. The old signposts have been lost, but in strangeness, possibility, I hope, moving, a shadow in uncertain passages, making melodies for newsless souls. In daring this, might I shape a star? Some limitless star. We, scrambling to replace what we barely knew, barely recognize our tangled metamorphosis, our hymns of recovery, organs of uncertain purpose in the body cosmic, mistaken easily for endings, not beginnings. That's it. All right. One last one, and then we can move to the second. Yes?
So did you say you would take a question and turn it into a poem?
It's like, you know what, we're just doing, it's like, tell you what, it's like, I'm giving you a subject, and, because this comes from part of our creative process that we try to encourage, especially in my students, is the confidence to take risk. And I also always joked with one of my best students then that I would never be caught dead in a situation where I don't have at least one poem that could possibly speak to a situation. We ran into this one time, though, because, and she's just blowing me off, going, oh, Bryan, that's ridiculous, right? Like, I'm just going to write about what I want to write about. And, we were getting brought into this very big thing here, like, we were all getting paid like $1,000 to do this workshop. And it was teaching hip-hop to Southeast Asian American youth. It's like, and I admit, as you can kind of guess, hip-hop is not quite my first expertise, all right? But, I was going to make my best go of it, and, it's like my mentee, she's got, her whole DJ set, and it's like, like Dr. Dre, and it's like, Jay-Z, it's like, I'm just going, oh, you know what, it's like, I'm just going to leave this to you. Yeah, that's right. It's like, she's, then it's like, okay. And then guess who our audience turned out to be? 5 8-year-old Somalian kids. Unfortunately, I happen to have a number of poems about Somalian youth here, and so I was all set there. But she's just and she's just scrambled. Yeah, right in Minnesota. It's like and you can only imagine. It's like I don't think you should play this album about cop killers here. It's like bad form. But she goes, okay, fine, you're right. And so now she's been writing a whole lot more about just about anything. But okay, so
can we
suggest anything?
Can we imagine the death of colonialism?
Ooh, the death of colonialism. Well, that's a classic one now, isn't it? Let's see. You know what? Okay, it's not necessary. All right, unfortunately, that one's about fighting colonialism. I was like, All right, tell you what, it's like I am actually going to go with Full Metal Hanuman. Then, ha! You can't catch me. All right.
You can freestyle it too.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, it's like, you're familiar with the Ramayana, with the Hindu epic, then, right? Well, it's like, okay, in Hinduism, there's a character called Hanuman, who's kind of like the best friend of a hero. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the Indian myth, and I'm terribly paraphrasing it, he's kind of like Rambo meets Romeo meets, meets Doctor Who, all wrapped up into one. And he helps bail out his friends in more situations than not. I actually kind of have this interesting take with our community then, that because they were created by the gods to specifically fight these gigantic giants which were terrorizing the world, it technically makes it kind of like the first time in mythology that you've kind of got like genetically modified bioweapons then. So it's an interesting question that came up in Full Metal Hanuman. Full Metal Hanuman. They fling us at empires when a cosmos needs to die, enhanced by the best AI minds of New Lanchan. In the boot tubes we sing. They'll never let us in. They'll never let us in. They'll never let us into holy Himapan. Not quite monkey, not quite man. In the future, true havoc needs more than a mere dog for war. Lautonium shell around a simian soul, dropping through the sky, ready to die, armed to the bone with free, strong hearts, tailored for express mayhem and murder of your pristine social orders. We close our eyes with enough time to dream. 6 hard minutes through the hot atmosphere. Visions of fabled Dao Vanon, our own planet, our own Caesar, our own books of law and liberty. Ape shall never kill ape. No spill blood. The joys of ahimsa. A distant world keeping all of your promises made to us for 400 centuries. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been wonderful. Again, and I turn it over to you.